Hello and welcome back to Pop Culture Yearbook. This is the 1994 episode, part 2. In the first episode, we focused on Pete's choice of Nirvana Unplugged, and today we're going to give our guest a chance to shine. And so, Gifford, who is back with us, why don't you tell us what you chose and why and how it fits into 1994 for you?
Well, for 1994, I chose to focus on the show Friends. Specifically, we're going to be talking about episodes 1 and 2. Friends debuted September 22nd of 1994. I started college a little later than you guys did. Morris started, and the University of Minnesota started end of September. So, if memory serves me, I believe my first Thursday at college was the debut of Friends.
Wow.
Really?
Yeah. So I chose Friends because, again, with this being a big year for all of us, Friends kind of encompassed my young adulthood. It started my first weekend at college and ended almost 1 year to the day before my first son was born. So it really kind of took in that 18 to 20, whatever it was. But it went till 1994, or 2004, I should say.
28.
Yeah, thank you.
There you go.
Anyway, I just really enjoyed the show. I thought since it kicked off in '94 and was such a huge cultural phenomenon, would be a good thing to include in Pop Culture Yearbook.
And I thought it was a great choice. And when you first brought it up, I was like, because I had thought about it myself, because I was a big fan of the show. But later in the series, there are some episodes and some arcs that I just was not a big fan of. And so I still loved it, watched it all the way to the end. But I don't know, Friends, for some reason, it almost feels like I don't know. People love Friends because it was on Netflix and all these kids were watching it. My daughter watched it. But at the same time, it almost feels like it's uncool to like Friends. Like it's not quite as smart as some other shows. But after doing this little homework and rewatching some episodes and remembering what I loved, this was fantastic. So it was really fun to go back and redo this.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, for me, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I think it's fitting too because we weren't living in apartments like them, but we were all moving off on our own. We were all living in a dorm with new people, and so just that whole kind of lifestyle kind of fit in with how this show was, even though they were more of an adult than we were in college. But you could kind of connect to that, I think, and so it's kind of fitting for us starting college too.
Yeah, I mean, for me, Friends was sort of the follow-up to Seinfeld. Not to get too much into Seinfeld, but it was like we were watching Seinfeld first. That came out in what year did Seinfeld start?
89.
The pilot ran in 1989. It's crazy.
Yep. Wow.
But 90 to 91 is when it really the full season started.
So that was the fixture on Thursday night for those years, and then it kind of led into Friends because they followed one of the Friends was right after Seinfeld for most of it. They were similar comedies, but still they were very different. I mean, in the sense that they were single people living in an apartment in New York City, but very different in terms of the group of people. So of course, Friends obviously was the group of six, and Seinfeld had its they were a little bit older and definitely lived very differently than those in Friends. But so there's always those obvious comparisons between the two. To me, what I had written down as I look back, I think Seinfeld was the funnier of the two shows, but Friends was the happier of the two shows in the sense that it had more of a storyline. It's more affectionate and everything, which was the exact opposite of everything that Larry David wanted to go for with Seinfeld anyway. So they both accomplished their goals perfectly. But Brad, what were you going to say?
That was his motto. It was no hugging or something.
No hugging. Yep.
David and Jerry Seinfeld. No hugging, no crying. It's
no hugging, no crying, and nothing that's ever been done in anything else.
I mean, Seinfeld's my number one show of all time.
Sorry.
But I don't and I love Friends too. I just people that want to compare them, I don't see the comparison. They're different. I mean, they're similarities, but they're two different shows, and I would rather just think of them as their own thing. And
Yeah.
so
Absolutely. I think one of the main reasons people might tie them together is because they did run back to back for so long together. So when you think of one, a lot of times you think of the other, because this was back when there was appointment television. You sat down on Thursday night and you watched these shows.
And it certainly didn't hurt Friends becoming successful that it was either airing right before or right after Seinfeld on Thursday night. It got the great time slot, but
Absolutely.
there was if you go back and look, there's a lot of shows that aired on those Thursday night time slots that were not good and didn't make it. So you still had to be a good show to actually take off.
You think of those two shows, and then you think right before Seinfeld. So in the 80s, all the sitcoms were almost all family sitcoms, right? And so now you have a transition to a different type of sitcom where it's not about a family. Neither one of these is about a family. It's just about people living in New York, or it's just about that period in your life where your friends are your family. And so that's kind of another comparison between the two, and why I think there's always going to be inevitable comparisons between those two shows.
But then
because of all those reasons we just
most of the shows
about.
were like family type shows, but the biggest hit really of them all at the time was Cheers, and that wasn't a family show. So these are kind of an extension of Cheers, maybe too, in a way, not in a bar, but still that kind of somewhat of that form. So
absolutely,
it's a good point.
Oh, thank you.
All right.
What else you got?
Well, what I like to do when I watch, because of course we watched episodes 1 and 2. So
and I did watch a bunch of others to make my list.
Right.
But yes, we focused. Everybody watched 1 and 2.
I watched a ton of them as well. What I like when I go back and watch shows that I've watched over and over, and then you come back and you watch the pilot, you always see these little differences in the sets. For example, let's go back to Seinfeld. Seinfeld opens Jerry and George sitting in a coffee shop talking, but it's not Monk's Cafe. Later in the episode, you see Jerry's apartment, but in his apartment, where the bathroom door is, there is no bathroom door in the pilot. The sets are a little different.
And then also, just since you brought it up, the waitress in the pilot, she's supposed to be like a recurring main character.
That's right.
And she, and I think, Elaine actually wasn't even in the pilot, was she?
Correct.
I think Elaine eventually took that role instead.
It was later that they decided they needed a female. Well, I don't think she was in the first maybe 2 or 3 episodes. It was the first few episodes.
I have to go back to that, but anyway, sorry.
I could be wrong. I don't want to get.
It's fun to rewatch the opening of shows because you might either remember or re-notice things that are just not quite the same.
Right.
Well, and when you watch the pilot of Friends, the main 2 sets are Monica's apartment and the coffee shop. And there are no differences throughout the show for the run of the show. I mean, there might be small differences here and there, but the main sets are the same. And the reason that was because Friends was actually bought based off the script. Most shows shoot pilots and then they shop them around to the networks. Friends was bought off of the script. The president at the time of NBC was actually looking for a show like this where you had a group of friends absent a family, and this group of friends goes through the trials and tribulations of life and lean on each other.
That's interesting because that first episode, it doesn't feel like a pilot. It feels like an episode. So that's
so NBC actually invested in this show prior to the pilot, and that's why the set that you see with the coffee house and the apartment are, so similar throughout the entire run of the show.
Look at this guy.
Although the couch is different. The couch
is a little different. Yeah.
The reason I know that is because I was watching this with my family, and I wouldn't have noticed it, but my wife pointed out that there's a rip or a tear in the couch in the first episode, and it's not in the second episode.
I did not notice
the tear.
Oh, I didn't notice that.
Wow, that's kind of stuff that she notices.
A couple other things. Ross was written with Schwimmer in mind when they wrote the original pilot. And Courtney Cox was supposed to play Rachel,
That's right.
but
I knew that too.
she liked the character of Monica better. The creators of the show did not want LeBlanc to play Joey, but because NBC was so involved in the beginning of the production, they insisted on him being in the show, and the other three were just cast off of auditions. But that's
Speaking
just
of going back and differences, the first thing I wrote down about episode 1
Mhm.
was my first observation: Joey's hair.
Right, and the boots. He wears cowboy boots.
He
that
I
gives
didn't
him
see
That I
a
didn't
little.
notice.
He's
Yeah.
got a different look. And I do remember, I think it's the beginning of season 3 or 2, but Joey and Chandler both showed up at the first episode with new haircuts, and they actually worked it into the episode. Like,
Oh, did they?
everybody's impressed with their new haircuts, and so they like don't make a big deal out of it.
Right. Well, and with episode 1, I thought it was interesting because they dive right into these characters. I thought the Joey character, they played a little too much on the New York Italian. Like he spoke a little differently than what his character grew into. But I mean, right off the bat, I mean, Ross is getting divorced. That's a arc throughout the entire run of the show.
Yeah.
Phoebe is a little more hippie-ish in the first, but they definitely set that standard for her right off
But
the
you
bat.
learn about having the history of being like homeless and the bad family life
Yep.
and stuff right off the
And
bat too.
suicide
Right off
that she had to deal
The
with.
show is
and-
so good with like setting up that history, and you'd think there'd be mistakes along the way that there's no way, but like
They were pretty consistent.
they were pretty. I mean, I don't know, but if you go back and look, I think it all ties together pretty well without any major obvious mistakes.
No, and I was kind of thinking back on it. Their arcs throughout their character arc throughout the entire run of the series was pretty consistent. Again, Ross, continues to get divorced. Monica's always the mother hen of the group, kind of taking care of everybody. She was always the one hosting, cooking, and doing things like that. And of course, we see her in her apartment doing that in the first episode. Joey's the constant womanizer. That starts off right away.
I will
And,
argue that there were two kind of changes in characters when you're done here.
the big one for me was Rachel, because she shows up in this first
That wasn't
episode
mine.
complete, kind of spoiled brat, dependent on her dad for paying for all her bills, and she's gonna just marry a man and be taken care of for the rest of her life. But by the end of the series, I mean, she's definitely
That's true.
independent woman. She's a mother. She's ready to move off, and she's a professional woman that does well for herself. So I thought her character changed the most during the run of the series.
The two that to me, I think, and I remember when the show first started, everybody loved Chandler. Chandler was hilarious. He was the funny guy, and to me, I felt like as the show went on, he got less and less funny. Like his jokes kind of fell flat. Plus, he had to get a new job and he got married, and so he kind of became more of a different person.
It's all over once
But
you
he
get married, Brad. You know
kind of
that.
reversed, and you see right off the bat here Ross with his hi, and he's the depressed guy. But I think you agree that at the end of the series, I mean, Ross is the star of the show. Everybody,
Ross is the best part.
Ross
of the
is,
whole
and I
show.
didn't like him much in the first few years. I
Mhm.
liked him in Rachel, but as a character, he was kind of annoying. But I mean, Jesus, that guy became the star and had the best episodes and was the
His-
craziest, funniest guy. And it all
comedy.
none of it happened. It all happened kind of just naturally after all those divorces, and then he didn't have Rachel anymore. He kind of just started to lose it a little and didn't know who he was. So I thought it was like Chandler was the funny guy, and then Ross was the funny guy. And I loved Chandler at first, and I loved Ross much, much more at the end. Chandler was kind of annoying, I thought, the last few years. He was okay.
He
but
was a little bit. Going back through when we were putting together, our favorite moments and episodes. Most of mine, I don't have anything past season 5. I just thought that things kind of really did kind of go downhill, unfortunately.
Really? Oh, well, I think there were some good ones for sure. It was a little more hit and miss. So
It was.
That's what I was saying.
Mhm.
Well, and in the later in the run, like to me, my least favorite storyline was the whole Joey and Rachel thing might get
Well,
together. Like,
since you
I
brought it up, when we got
Everybody
later, I
hated
was gonna
that.
say my
care for
worst episode and arc was Joey and Rachel trying to date, and then there's that one episode which I bet you'll remember, where they're watching Cujo, and she's sitting on his lap, and it's like the worst acting they both ever did, and she doesn't want to watch, and she hugs him, and it's just so contrived, and
Oh, absolutely.
it makes me retch when I watch that episode. So it's that kind of stuff that every once in a while happened. But
Right.
there were still a lot of great episodes and moments
Well,
all the way to the end, too.
And you don't mess with Joey's singleness. Like, Joey's the 65-year-old fun uncle who drives a killer car and dates somebody half.
I don't know. I actually
You know,
kind of
like-
liked that because there were other girls he wanted to be more serious with, like Elle McPherson, too, whatever her name was. He kind of
Yep.
changed as he got older. He matured, and I did kind of like that. But I didn't like the part with Rachel. That just didn't
Well,
work.
why didn't they at the end? Why didn't they get him together with Phoebe? I kept thinking, and I remember that I thought that's where they're going to go with it. That all three of them
She
were going
always
to be
hinted
dating.
at it as jokes throughout the whole series. Those were
Right.
always fun jokes.
And they actually, in some of the episodes I've been watching in the last couple of days, they've had like the marathons on TBS or whatever. So I was like, well, I'll watch a few of these in prep for this show. And their dynamic together is really great. It's funny.
I don't know.
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, when you
But
can
they
do whatever
needed-
you want when the series ends. They could have done that, but
Right.
But they needed
Right.
to have the Joey spinoff. Everybody remembers how great
which
Joey.
I did watch, and actually, I didn't think it was all that bad. It was.
I did.
Oh,
It
It
lost
wasn't
the
great.
luster.
It wasn't great by any means, but I did watch it, and it was okay. There's been worse spinoffs.
You know, Matt LeBlanc was actually in a spinoff of Married with Children.
I didn't know that.
That's what I remember him from the first time I saw him, because he was actually dating Christina Applegate, so Kelly Bundy, which is actually funny because she was in Friends in a couple of episodes that I
As
just saw
Rachel.
today. She's Rachel's sister.
Yep.
And
Along
they all
with,
hate her.
Reese Witherspoon, right?
Yeah,
Wasn't
Reese
Reese
Witherspoon was
the other?
another sister.
Oh, really? I didn't remember that. But
And that was, since you just brought that up, I'll say one of the other things that I wasn't always a huge fan of on the show. They had a lot of guest stars, and a lot of times I felt that was just completely unnecessary. And some were pretty funny, and some were fine. But like the show, by the time they had these big guest stars on, the actors themselves were so big by that time, they didn't need a
Right.
guest star. And
Right.
so, I mean, I guess they're just doing it for fun. And some of them worked, and some of them I just didn't like a lot. Like people like the Brad Pitt one. I don't know. I felt Brad Pitt was kind of weird on that episode. That it didn't quite fit.
I think they just
so.
had to do it because he was with.
Well, they were dating at the time.
They were dating or married with Jennifer Aniston, right? So
Did they ever
They
get
might
married? I
have
don't
been
know.
married at the time.
I thought they were married, and then they got divorced because he was cheating on her with Angelina Jolie.
The one thing, and I don't know, maybe you know this, Gifford, because you did some more research, or maybe you found something, but the one thing history-wise that I felt like they kind of lacked in the show. So when Rachel comes in, I mean, we get all these flashback episodes later, and everybody loves those episodes, and they're like best friends. I mean, for years.
Mm-hmm.
And so she does mention we kind of drifted apart, but that's all she says. And it's like, well, so much that she's not invited to the wedding, but you still somehow know where she lives, and
Right.
it didn't add up. I thought they could have done maybe a little more with that, but who cares, whatever. And then, I mean, they've mentioned that Monica has this huge, amazing apartment, and they talk about rent control to try to probably appease critics who are like, well, there's no way she could live there.
Right.
But and there was one episode too in a flashback where Phoebe used to live there, and she kind of just moves out over time.
Right.
But I thought that might be. I actually thought maybe that was this first episode, and it wasn't. So, like, how long has Monica been living in this apartment by herself? That seems a little just fishy that she could afford that, and then there just happens to be an empty bedroom. So
don't overthink it, Brad.
No,
just
I'm not
enjoy the
overthinking.
show.
I'm just saying, if I was gonna, because they did such a good job with all that history stuff, with all those flashback episodes. But those are the questions that came to my head.
Well, and this,
about those things.
one way that she might have been able to afford that apartment, besides rent control, is that she didn't have the heat on very much, because obviously Rachel was adversely affected by the
Yes,
Temptation Park.
every episode you just over and over and over again. It's kind of crazy.
So
Did that even happen in the first one or two episodes? I think too.
I don't quite
Unless I'm thinking of
remember,
one of the other ones I watched,
but honestly, I mean, they were the 7th and 8th members of that cast.
they were a lot.
So, does anybody else have anything else on number 1 episode?
I did have one other note. So when Joey's starting to talk to Ross about trying to cheer him up, and he gives him this big speech about one woman and how you need to move on. There was a friend. So we talked about music on our last episode, and obviously I'm a huge music fan. There was a Friends CD that came out after the first year or two, and between all the songs, they had a bunch of clips, and that clip was in there, and it just every time I hear it, it's like it just makes me think of that CD right away because I heard it so many times. But beyond that, the CD was awesome. It had REM on it. It had,
What was on it?
It had REM on it. It had Bare Naked Ladies. It had Paul Westerberg. It had The Pretenders. It had Toad the Wet Sprocket. It had Hootie and the Blowfish on there.
What REM song was it?
It was they played it at a party in one of the episodes.
It was was it
it's not one of their it's like a song from that album. It's not like one of their songs from one of their main albums. I forget the name of it.
Because I was watching one the other day, and What's the Frequency, Kenneth, was on one of the
episodes. Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, that's not the one that was on there. But yeah, that album came out in '94 as well. So that would fit right in there. But so I love that CD, and it just made me think of it. And so I think that was and then I just wrote down, like you said, I think that I had forgotten how they set up the Ross and Rachel dynamic right away in episode 1. That's just, kind of cool that they were able to kind of have all that.
It's a free world, baby.
That's what I was just going to look up. It's called It's a Free World, Baby. Yep.
Okay.
So.
Interesting.
All right. So that's all I had for episode 1.
I have nothing more to add. Carry on.
So in episode 2, obviously the biggest thing I'm sure everybody noticed was the actress playing Carol is different. Of course, we learn in this one that Ross's soon-to-be lesbian ex-wife, is pregnant with his child, and Carol is played by a different actress, which is a little strange that she was only in this show for 1 episode. Oddly enough, that same actress was replaced after 18 episodes as Karen Foxworthy on the Jeff Foxworthy Show. So she was replaced.
So she was only on this 1 episode.
Yeah, she was only on the 1 episode.
I thought, but they didn't confirm that she wasn't on another one. But I do always remember that she was different. Yet the girl that she's with now, that's the right Susan that was always in it throughout. So
the same Susan. Yep. This episode we start to see Monica's OCD side a little bit. So that feeds right into her character, and we see that throughout the run of the show. We get our first introduction to Ugly Naked Guy.
I wrote that down too. He goes all the way back to episode 2.
That I didn't know until I watched this. I didn't know that he was all the way back to the beginning like that. It was another one of those things, just like the Ross and Rachel storyline. Until I rewatched this first episode, I didn't think it went back that far. I thought it just sort of came in later, but I was wrong. Go on.
This is the first time we hear about Ursula, Phoebe's twin sister.
Oh yeah, she mentions her
that too. There's a lot of storylines that uncovered.
And she was on. Do you remember? She was on Mad About You.
Mad About You. Well, and I did write down
show
in season 1 how they were really pushing the show because it followed Seinfeld, and then in episodes 16 and 17. They have Jamie and Fran from Mad About You come into the coffee shop.
Oh, yeah, there is that one where they're on.
And this is a 2-part episode. So in 17, they had Doctors Mitchell and Rosen from ER, Clooney and Noah Wiley come in. So they were definitely pushing the cross-show synergy.
Yeah.
Trying to get friends
ER
really.
debuted that year too, so they were all kind
Yes,
of
it did.
supporting each other. And not Mad About
Yep.
You, I think, had been on for a year or two, but ER was new as
Right.
well.
One thing I found interesting, still no Joey and Chandler's apartment yet. We don't see that
Yeah, was
until
it not
episode
even
3.
in that one too?
Nope.
Oh,
No, they hadn't shown that yet.
that is interesting.
I remember that. I remember thinking that, like, while watching the show when it was on, like in the 90s, like that was something that came a little bit later. Like they started expanding the set to include their apartment. But it wasn't right away. That I do remember.
Yep. Yeah, I think it is in episode 3 as far I wrote that down. But yeah, it was kind of strange that we see where Ross works at the museum before we see one of the main
Well, you even
sets.
see Ross's apartment in episode
That's
1
right.
because they
Yeah.
can put together furniture, which
Mhm.
you know, and you hardly ever see where Ross is living until he moves into Ugly Naked Guy's apartment, and then there's more there.
Right.
Where he lived with Rachel for a while.
She did actually live there, didn't she?
I saw, yeah, because that was on some of the episodes I've been watching.
She was living
They
there.
weren't together, but they had a kid together, and so they were living together, and it wasn't working out. They were having problems with that scenario.
I think they lived together while she was pregnant, because then
And
she moves
after the
back in
baby
with
was born.
Joey, because Emma's they have the crib and everything back at Joey's place.
Yeah, well, eventually she moved in with Joey because
They had a big fight. That was the deal. Rachel and Ross had a big fight while they were living
Weird.
together, and so then she moved out because they couldn't handle, like, Ross tried to, well, Rachel like kissed a guy, a coworker, and Ross saw it from across the way, and then Ross wanted to start dating, and it just was not working well. So then she moved out.
And the parents make an appearance right away too in episode 2, and I love Elliot Gould and the parents.
He was perfect for that role. Absolutely perfect.
There were two lines that I really liked. Or did you have more?
Oh, no, go ahead. Go ahead.
It's a pause. So the one just kind of funny line I thought was I don't remember who said what, but then Phoebe says "doy," and Chandler goes, "You don't get a lot of doy anymore." But then the best line of the whole thing was because they talk so much about how Ross is the golden child and all that, and he finally admits all this stuff to his parents, and the mom goes right away to Monica, "And you knew about this?"
Right.
That was perfectly done.
See, what I liked about that episode, I believe it was this episode where Monica made some comment about, I know you can't choose your parents, but if I could choose a set of parents, I'd like to have yours, is what she says to Ross. Because, of course, how
Right.
differently they treat their two children.
Oh, that was good.
That's all I have for this episode. So if you guys have more, jump in.
No, that's about it for that I have for those two.
No, I'm good. If you want to go to memorable moments.
Yeah, what I did for this, does somebody else want to go, or do you want me to just dive right in?
Go
here?
first. It's
Go
your
for
choice.
it.
All right. Well, what I did was I marked down my top 5 episodes.
I did too.
And usually, I find myself just picking out a moment or a line from those episodes that just really sets it over the top. I think the writing on this show is wonderful. They really did a great job, not only writing it, but then the characters delivering the lines. One thing I did like about the show was there was no laugh track. They did all their shows in front of live audiences, so you did have a little bit more of a genuine response to these jokes.
Was it always that way? Because I do remember there were times where you could tell, or they responded like, well, they would like cheer like when people kissed for the first time or something, and it was definitely different than just a laugh track. So, I guess So was it always like
Never
a genuine
thought about that.
response?
Yeah. Well, I shouldn't say maybe not genuine every time, because obviously they would have taken more than one take. So if they went to hit it on the first take, so the audience would have known what was coming.
But that is one thing about the show, is that there were times where the audience definitely kind of interacts in a way where you can tell, that they're sitting there and they're into it and what they want to see happen.
Right. Mm-hmm. So my number 5 I took from season 4, episode 18. the one with Rachel's new dress. Two things I loved about this episode. This is an episode in which Rachel goes over to Joshua's place. She cooks him a nice dinner, and then they end
Oh,
up going over to his apartment because
I know
he's
what line
screwed
you're
up on the
talking
chicken
about.
and duck.
This is a great episode.
And so she's going to have the whoopee with Joshua for the first time, and she buys this beautiful little negligee, and she doesn't realize that his parents have come back, and she comes out in the living room with this dress on, and Joshua's father looks at this gorgeous woman in this tiny little dress and says, "I like her. She seems smart."
I knew you were going to say that. That was one I forgot about, and I love that too.
That is just, I absolutely love that line. It's so well written, and his delivery of it was just absolutely spot on. My number 4, season 5, episode 14, the one where everyone finds out. This one, of course, Chandler and Monica are in a relationship, but Phoebe doesn't know yet. Rachel had found out earlier. Joey, of course, has known the whole time. So they start going back and forth between Monica and Chandler don't know that Rachel and Phoebe knows, but then they find out. They're going back and forth playing these games.
I know that we know they know.
Right. So Phoebe is trying to seduce Chandler to make him break and admit that him and Monica are in a relationship. And Chandler says to Phoebe, "I'm really looking forward to all the sex." And Phoebe's response is, "Good, because I'm really bendy."
That's so good. I also love in that one where Joey says, "Show me your bra. You can't work bras." Then he just flicks her bra open, and they all just kind of jump.
And they go, "Oh, you didn't even rip off any buttons?" He goes,
Not my first time.
So number 3, season 4, episode 11, the one with Phoebe's uterus. This is one in which Chandler is dating one of Joey's old girlfriends, and he's worried about his ability to please her in the bedroom and not be able to match
Because
up
she's been with Joey.
with Joey's prowess. And he says either he's really good at sex or she just really likes agreeing with him. So Monica draws a woman on a piece of paper and points out all the erogenous zones.
Oh, this is that
Yes,
one.
the 7.
And then goes through and marks them. And of course, Chandler's reaction when she gets past 3 and keeps going is just phenomenal. And then Monica goes through and does you can start with a 1, 2, a 1, 2, 3, pointing out on the thing, and she ends, of course, with the 7, 7, 7, and then just holding up 7 fingers.
Yeah.
And silent is just
Classic.
just beautiful. My number 2 is from season 2, episode 14, the one with the prom video.
Yes,
This
that's
one
good.
in which, again,
This is the
parents
first
of
time
Ross,
they do the flashbacks, right? And
This
we
is
get
the
to
first
see all
flashback.
that. That was
Yeah.
everybody loved that.
So this is the first time they did the flashback, and Monica and Ross's parents are turning Monica's room, of course, into a gym and leaving Ross's alone because it's filled with medals and trophies and stuff. So they bring a bunch of her stuff over, and in that is a prom video. And this is the first time we see Monica in high school, and when she was a larger gal at the time. And of course, the wonderful line from this one is they show the video, and Monica comes into frame, and Joey says, "That girl ate Monica," and Monica says, "Shut up, the camera adds 10 pounds." And
Here it
Chandler's
comes.
great line is, "So how many cameras are actually on you?"
That's one of the best lines of the whole.
Yes.
That is one of the greatest lines ever. And then number 1 episode, And number one in all our hearts, or it should be, is season 4, episode 12, the one with all the embryos, and that includes the contest between Rachel and Monica and Joey and Chandler, between who knows who the best. And of course, there's lines up the wazoo, but that is just the greatest episode where you really get to hear all these fun little tidbits about the characters and things from their past. So those were my top
Those are
5
great
episode moments.
choices. Can I go next? Because I did episodes 2 and a couple overlap, but we have some just kind of arcs that are overlapping
Go for
too.
it. Go for it.
So I loved your choices, and you had a couple that are in the same time frame as mine, but I have a different one, which is
Sure.
interesting. So number 5, I had, you brought up Chandler, the one with the 7, and he's dating Kathy. I
Yep.
have number 5 is the one where Chandler is in a box.
And that was a great one.
Joey put him in the box to try to like make up for it, and it's really funny episode, but I just love that because Joey and Chandler are the best friends ever, and they're about to like hate each other, and Chandler loves her so much, and and he's not trying to be mean, and he can't help it, and it just shows how close those two are. And at the end, when Joey hugs him and says "Go get her," and it's funny, and it's also very sappy in a good way too.
Touching.
Yeah. Number 4, I had the one where no one's ready, and that's the one. I compare that to kind of the Chinese restaurant episode of Seinfeld, where the whole episode just takes place in a Chinese restaurant, and they're just standing there waiting. And in this episode, they're going to go to Ross's benefit, and they're all just waiting and getting ready. Joey and Chandler are just being idiots to each other because he wants his chair, and he takes the cushions, and then Joey comes in wearing all his clothes. And Rachel gets mad because Ross yells at her, and then they have to make up, and he's going to drink the fat. And that episode, I just feel like it's perfect because everything about every character that you love is just showcased perfectly. It's just they take the characters are just perfect, and they're all just confined in that one space. And Phoebe, her dress gets ruined, and she puts the big Christmas bow on, and she totally makes that happen. What?
I got the hummus.
So that one's just, I mean, not much happens, but that's the beauty of it, and they hit the characters so good. Number 3, I had the one where everyone finds out, which you've already discussed, but I mean that's an all-time classic, and I remember the first time watching that, just knowing right away this is as good as it gets. Number 2, you didn't have, and this could be my number 1 actually. Actually, here's what I'll do. So my number 1 is the one with the embryos because I agree with you. The first time I saw that episode, it was an instant classic. You just knew people were talking about it the next day, and you'd watch it on tape over again. This episode was just amazing, and line after line, and the whole switching apartments. What a great idea to change up the show again for a while. I loved it. But the other one that I love about equally is the one where Ross got high. And so they did a lot of great Thanksgiving episodes, and they're kind of known for that. And none beat this one. So this is the one. My favorite line of the series just about is, "It tastes like feet," because Rachel makes the trifle and screws it up. And everybody's there, and Joey's eating it all because beef good, custard good. And then the parents are on that one too, and everybody just kind of Joey and Ross want to leave and go hang out with Elle McPherson and her dancer friends, and everybody's got their own thing. And this is the first time the parents have seen Monica really since she's been with Chandler, and she hasn't told them yet, because we find out her parents hate Chandler because when Joey was in college, he smoked pot and he got caught by them, and he blamed it on Chandler and said that he was smoking pot and he jumped out the window. And so they hate Chandler. So Joey finally, well, actually, he doesn't tell them. Monica does because he won't do it. And then the two of them go back and forth with all these horrible things each one has done. And then Joey chimes in and Phoebe chimes in, and Rachel's like, "I wasn't supposed to put beef in the trifle." And then the mom stands up and tells every single one of them like what happened. And then they love Chandler now. It's just a great. I was going to start writing lines down when I watched that one, and I couldn't keep up. There are so many lines.
That's
So
the
that's
same
my
one.
1A to the one with the embryos.
The one with the embryos the same way from start to finish. Is
Yeah,
just
there's too
line
many
after
lines.
line after line.
And that whole I love the picking the things out of the bag, but then I love when they say, "Well, Ross will make the questions for our game," and he's like, "Oh, Ross doesn't have to have a son or anything else to do," and they go, "Okay, well, ask Phoebe," and he goes, "No, I want to play."
Or what about how they know that there's Scotch tape in the bag?
Yeah.
Because last night we used up yours making scary faces, and they're so proud of themselves.
I know.
These two grown men who are doing something that middle
The
schoolers
acting
would be doing.
they're so good at those roles. So I really, really enjoyed making those top 5 episodes, and I watched all of them just to double check as I was doing it. I'll just, if I can just finish mine up here, Pete. I mentioned the things I didn't like about the show. The one thing that I wrote down that I like that's not really related to a specific episode, but I didn't really like a lot of the celebrity guests, but there are some characters that had like guest arcs on it that I just loved. And Kathy was one of those. I loved that whole Chandler and Kathy. They really did well with that. I loved Mona with Ross when Ross had all those girls dancing on his feet to try to impress her. And Gert, what you doing there, Gert? That was fun. One of the few people that Ross dated that I've like enjoyed watching. You remember when Eddie moved in for a while when Joey moved out, and he had the gold fish, and he said, "See you, pals." I loved Eddie, and then I loved John Favreau was on as Pete, Monica's boyfriend, and he was great. That was a really fun little arc. And then I also loved those beach episodes where Ross and Rachel like kind of come back together, and then he yells, "We were on a break." Those episodes are really fun too.
Yep.
I love that.
Tom Selleck was another good, a good recurring role
so
too.
he was an actual celebrity, and he's one of the ones that was good. I enjoyed him very much.
Yeah, definitely.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so that's everything I had.
So mine, as I said earlier, it was not so much episodes, but it was more like moments that stood out to me. Number 5, the line "moo point" by Joey, or it's a moo point. What? Like a cow's opinion.
Doesn't
matter. That's just like epitomizes Joey, and it's perfect, and it's just a simple, stupid line that stands out, and it's one that comes up all the time. Like, I repeat that.
What's so funny about it is it kind of makes sense too.
Right. Yeah, he does it a lot. It's like he'll throw out another explanation. It does make sense. Number 4, I had pivot.
Yeah.
When they were moving the couch up the steps. I don't know why that one gets me every time, but it's hilarious. Ross, it's another great Ross moment.
What I love is Chandler's response is "Shut up, shut up, shut
up." Number 3, I had one that one of you had already mentioned, but it was the one where Joey puts on all of Chandler's clothes. Mm-hmm. Number 2 is the eyelash curler one. That's the one where Joey finds out. And that's how he finds out. And it's the moment that he realizes why the eyelash curler. And so the backdrop on that one is something like Monica had forgotten her eyelash curler in Joey and Chandler's apartment because she had spent the night with Chandler. And so then he found it, and it's like, what is this? And then they're talking about what it was and everything. Then later, Monica realizes that she can't find her eyelash curler, and she's looking for it. And then that was the moment where the very moment where Joey figures it out is perfect, where he just like, and then they grab him and pick him up and carry him into the bedroom, and then they like shut his mouth. Just a hilarious episode. And then number 1, the holiday armadillo, where Ross had to he couldn't. It was the last minute. He was looking for a Santa Claus outfit for his son. Couldn't find one because it was Christmas, 2 days before Christmas. He goes to the costume shop, and like all they had left was was an armadillo costume. So he shows up to the apartment wearing it and tries to convince him that he's the holiday armadillo. And like he's trying to explain all of this to his son. Meanwhile, Chandler walks in wearing a Santa Claus suit. And then they're trying to explain to Chandler what's going on without being obvious to the son. And it was like it's like a Jewish thing, you know. And then Chandler's like, "Oh, what?"
That is so great. I totally tries to explain what's going on, and Chandler just looks at him and pauses, and he goes,
he just he steps forward like he's gonna say something big and
Yeah.
important, and then it's just what?
okay,
And then a minute later, they have it all figured out, and then Joey jumps in wearing a Superman costume. Like none of it makes any sense. But that's my top 5.
I had one more line. So you brought up the prom video one, Gifford, and it's not a funny line, but I love how the episode ends where Rachel walks across the room and kisses him, and then Monica says, "See, he's her lobster," and that's just such a memorable moment because you've been waiting for that for like 2 years, and they just did such a great job of hitting that big moment that they could have been pretty stupid and didn't.
Right. Do the claws again. Remember?
All right. So since we talked about TV, we were going to finish this up with our top 5 TV of 1994. So we can move on to that unless you will have any more friends' comments to throw in.
I could talk about this for a few more hours, but
Really
we'll
could
just leave it at that.
Yeah.
I'd love to just turn some on and watch them with you.
Right.
All right. Well, I'll do my TV first, and then Gifford, you can go, and then Pete, you can wrap it up.
All right.
I had some shows, but then I had one kind of special answer here. So for number 5, I put Saved by the Bell, the college years, and that's because I couldn't find a lot of better options. And I do remember that show ran for one season in '94, like a primetime version of it, and I watched it every week. And I was a huge Saved by the Bell fan, so I gave it a shot. And it was just as dumb as Saved by the Bell, but what that means is it kind of made me laugh here and there, and it just made me feel good.
That's the point.
Right. Number 4, I had Monday Night Football, because when I went to college, we only got like 2 channels in our dorm room, and every Monday night we would watch Monday Night Football. I lived with a football player, and that just became like an event every week. For 3, I had Friends, because I did watch it right from the get-go, and I was a big fan. And then number 1, I had Seinfeld, because that was my favorite show, and this is like peak time. And then the one that's missing here, it's not a show, but this was the year of OJ, and I will never forget watching the OJ chase, and then all the other stuff that came out, and not the trial yet, but just, oh my God, did OJ really do this? You could not believe it. And it began like a 2-year just run of OJ all the time, and I was fascinated by OJ and the whole thing. I could not get enough. So that was my list. 2 other shows that I did watch that year that I didn't really include, but I did watch Wings, and I watched 90210 sometimes. So
I'd forgot about that show.
Sure. Well,
right.
This was a big year in TV for me, for the simple reason that I went to college and was exposed to cable television and NBC.
And that's funny. Sorry to interrupt, but when I went to college, we didn't get cable in our rooms, and that was the worst part of it. So I went from getting everything to getting nothing again and having horrible reception. And you went just the opposite.
Yeah, we got everything in Mankato too.
Most guys
did.
On your past episodes have talked about growing up on farms. Well, I grew up on a farm, milking cows and pigs and
milking pigs.
No, not milking the pigs, milking cows. But out on the farm, like you guys have mentioned, we only got ABC, ABC, CBS, and PBS. That was it. So when I went to college, again, we didn't have cable in the rooms either, but as a floor, everybody on the floor bought a TV, put it in the common room, and then, we're hooked up to cable. So everything on my list is pretty much, well, no, I shouldn't say that, but NBC was on there, of course. But what I remember when I went to college was in the mornings, there was Sports Center, and they ran the same Sports Center from 6 o'clock until noon every hour. And then the afternoon, it got switched over to MTV. So for me, and then you just watch videos. So for me, I put Sports Center as my number 5, I would come back from class in the morning and at least watch 2 episodes of the exact same Sports Center every morning. Number 4, SNL. Watched SNL a fair amount that year. Simpsons, number 3. Watched a lot of Simpsons. And then number 2 was Friends, and number 1 was Seinfeld. And of course, this was the first time I ever watched any of those shows.
So I was just going to ask. So
Yeah.
we talked about Seinfeld in school, like in the morning before school, every Friday through high school. You never even like watched it. You never even saw it.
And you guys would talk about SNL every Monday, unless I was over at one of your guys' places. I didn't see it because I didn't get it.
Wow, that is a crazy world.
Yeah, it killed me listening to you guys talk about all these shows in high school because I'm like, yeah, I didn't see it. And like I'm
so sorry.
Chad Drake would talk about, like Fresh Prince all the time and In Living Color and, all these other shows. No. Sorry, bud. Never saw it. So.
Wow. We didn't mean to make you feel so excluded.
No, that's okay. That's
really mind-boggling to think. And like, why couldn't anybody get NBC? I mean, this is a network, but you couldn't pick it up anywhere if you were watching on like rabbit ears like that.
No,
right.
Come in down there.
Yeah.
Nope.
It's dumb. Pete?
All right, so my top 5. I actually had Married with Children on my list because I remember watching it, although this was the era when it was really on its downhill slide. I wasn't watching it as much anymore as I had back probably 3 or 4 years earlier, but I had it on my list as I looked at shows that were on during that year. The primetime show that I had was Northern Exposure. The one that you guys didn't mention is one I had forgotten about. That really was a good show that I enjoyed watching back in that.
I have mentioned it because I watched it when it first started and really did love it. I agree. But I don't think I watched it here at the end. This is the season where it ended, I think, right? And I was not watching
it was around there, yeah.
But it was a very good show.
Yep. Filmed in Minnesota, too. I think it took place in Alaska.
Yes.
But a lot of the filming was done here in Minnesota.
I think you might be right.
I actually watched that show because that was, I think, was that ABC?
ABC.
ABC or CBS?
Sunday nights, unless they moved it around. I don't remember.
Yeah. And then I had The Simpsons, which it's amazing it's still on because I remember we started watching it like in middle school. And here we are. Our kids are in middle school now, and my kid is anyway, and still on. Frasier, Friends, and Seinfeld to round it out. Nothing surprising there. But that rounds out my top 5. What's that?
I got into Frasier in college when I lived by myself for a year. I remember watching that like every week.
Yeah.
But I didn't watch it, I don't think, yet at that point. I at least all the time. But that's a good show, of course, too, because I love Cheers.
It was. That was on Thursday night. Thursday night was at Mankato. That was the big party night, so there wasn't a lot of like just TV watching. But I did enjoy it when I did get the chance to watch it. So.
Yeah, I think I never really got into Frasier, but yeah, that would have been on after Friends and Seinfeld.
I think so.
I think that was why, was because that was about the time.
I'm not even sure if it was on Thursday nights ever. It was.
Yeah, it was.
I'm pretty sure it was on. It eventually became Thursday. I don't know. Maybe
the first year on Thursday to take over for Cheers, I guess. But I know later it was a big enough show. They moved it to Wednesdays, and it was on with News Radio. Or Tuesdays.
Oh, yes.
Well, News Radio.
It became like the big linchpin show for a different night.
Right.
Okay.
And I remember watching News Radio. That was just a phenomenal show.
Yeah, that's a great one. Because that's when I actually watched those. I recorded those on my VCR, and I had like a night class, and I would come home and watch those 2 shows.
Sure.
Afterwards. Right. Not this year, but like later on. But I remember that.
Okay. Anybody else have anything more to add before we wrap it up?
No, I think we can put a pin in this one until the next 94 episode.
Okay. Thanks for listening. There you go. Thanks for listening, everyone. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at Pop Yearbook. And I do want to give a shout out to Preacher Row, the band that has allowed us to listen or to play their music on our show. So thank you very much. And that's what we'll be playing. Bye, everybody.
See ya.
See ya.
don't you fear? No one's gonna comfort me. Sorry for what I have done. Sorry that your song is gone. 7 steps and it will be my last. And start to me on my back. I turn and I look to you. I'm scared but there's nothing I can do.